Good evening. This is an extraordinary period for America's economy. Over the past few weeks, many Americans have felt anxiety about their finances and their future. I understand their worry and their frustration. We've seen triple-digit swings in the stock market. Major financial institutions have teetered on the edge of collapse, and some have failed. As uncertainty has grown, many banks have restricted lending. Credit markets have frozen, and families and businesses have found it harder to borrow money. We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis.
The bursting of the U.S. housing bubble, which peaked in 2006, caused the values of securities tied to the U.S. real estate pricing to plummet, damaging the financial institutions globally. The financial crisis was triggered by a complex interplay of policies that encouraged home ownership, providing easier access for loans, subprime borrowers, overvaluation of bundled subprime mortgages, based on the theory that housing prices would continue to escalate. Questionable trading practices on behalf of both buyers and sellers, compensation structures that prioritize short-term deal flow over long-term value creation, and a lack of adequate capital holdings from the banks and insurance companies to back the financial commitments on which they were making. Questions regarding the bank's solvency, declines in credit availability, and damaged investors' confidence had an impact on the global stock markets, where securities suffered large losses during 2008 and early 2009. Economies worldwide slowed and continued an international trade decline. Governments and central banks responded with unprecedented fiscal stimulus, monetary policy expansion, and institutional bailouts.
Now we are in the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And a lot of you, I think, are worried about your jobs, your pensions, your retirement accounts, your ability to send your child or your grandchild to college.
As a result of the economic collapse, the United States of America has been treading water of an all-out depression. Since 2009, taxes have been raised on the citizens, job growth has plateaued, and the unemployment rate has risen. More citizens are depending on the government every year for their yearly income. Since the Obama administration, the U.S. government has spent a miraculous amount of money in which we cannot pay back. The debt has increased 57%, more than half of our total debt as a nation before the Obama administration took office.
As you can tell by the chart displayed, unemployment rate has risen from 2007 to 2008.
With dysfunction in Washington, terrible housing sales, and a crippling unemployment rate of the United States economy, there has been no clear signs of any kind of recovery. There have been no real spending cuts, taxes have been risen, and hardworking classes families are forced to pick up the slack for people who find no incentive to want to work, but instead to live off handouts from our government.
Problem. I mean, we have enormous problems with our debt. Our debt is approaching 100% of our gross domestic product. Our whole economy is equal to our debt now. That's a real problem. One of the things that I think really got me about his budget when I saw the proposals, some of it's a 10-year plan. He's going to spend $46 trillion over 10 years. Just the mind-boggling nature of that number. But it's also going to double the amount of debt. When he came into office, there was $8 billion in debt, and I complained about the Republicans. I'm one of the few who ran in the primary saying Republicans weren't doing a good job. He's going to leave office if he wins another term with $27 billion. He's going to triple the debt during his period of time. And it's not just whether it's Democrats versus Republican, it's can the country sustain that level of debt?
Our plan for economic growth should entail an array of ideas. We should strive for energy independence, lowering health care costs with an independent insurance market, lowering taxes, cutting waste spending, immigration reform, border security, and expanding markets for manufacturers and small business. Lastly, we want to stop the waste in Washington and fix our broke government. So our message to the U.S. Congress is to stop the bickering. Come together and find real solutions so our generations and generations to come won't be affected by the sea of debt, monumental unemployment, and high taxes.